Story 16. The Clockmaker's Daughter. Daily Life in a Swiss Bell Tower, 1489 CE. You wake before the sun. Not because you want to, but because the bell must ring. Its sound will roll down the hill, across the thatched rooftops and slate chimneys of a small alpine town whose name is carved into church ledgers, but whose ink has mostly faded. Your name is Elspeth, though no one writes it down. You're 13 years old and your father Matthias, the town's clockmaker, has trusted you with a sacred duty, to wind the tower clock before dawn, so the bell rings at the proper hour. Because in 1489, time does not tick by silently in bedrooms. It's heard, it's measured in bells, and tracked by hands that must turn cogs to keep the hours alive. And today, like every day, the town's morning depends on you. The tower that held the town together. The bell tower sits at the center of town, built of thick stone, patched with moss. It houses not just the bell, but the mechanical clockwork, a relatively new invention in Alpine Europe. It has a wooden gear drum, iron flywheels, a long rope with a heavy stone weight, levers that lift the hammer to strike the bell. Your father built it by hand. Most in town don't understand how it works. They simply trust that when the bell rings, it's time to rise, or pray, or bake, or call for market setup, or begin the school day in the single-room church hall. But behind that regularity is labor. The gears must be wound manually. The weight must be reset. And that task, as of this spring, belongs to you. Because your brother went off to apprentice in Bern, and your father's hands now tremble. So you climb the stone steps with a lantern and the key, turn the crank slowly, wood groaning beneath your palm, until the weight pulls taut again. It takes nearly an hour. And when you're done, your fingers are black with grease. But the tower sighs with balance. And soon, at the 6th hour, the bell will sound. Time kept by young hands. Elspeth does not read Latin, but she can read the gear teeth. She knows the resistance of the crank changes when the weight nears its top. She knows how to listen for the faint rattle that means the chain is loose. She has been taught to oil the flywheel with a pig's bristle brush dipped in goose fat and lamp soot. She knows, instinctively, how long it takes to wind the rope in winter when the grease hardens, and in spring, when the damp causes the rope to swell. She carries chalk to mark the last wind on the tower wall. She carries a spare pin for when the drive spindle slips its post. And she carries a scrap of cloth, not for her hands, but to wipe the face of the tower clock, because her father always said, "Time must be seen, not guessed." And so she keeps it clean. Timekeeping in this era isn't abstract. It's physical. It lives in stone and iron and flesh and fatigue. And in Elspeth's small hands. Why time mattered more than accuracy. In 1489, the townspeople don't care if the bell rings at exactly 6:00, but they do care that it rings when it's supposed to. Their lives depend on it. The baker, already rising to light his oven, listens for the bell before setting the first dough to rise. The priest lights the chapel candles as the first echo rolls in. A widow at the edge of town listens to know when to take her goats to pasture. Time here is social, not numerical. It gathers the town, and the bell is its voice. But only if someone like Elspeth keeps it wound. Only if someone understands that a missed winding is not just a silence, it's confusion. A quiet clockmaker's apprenticeship. Your father is awake when you return. He nods, doesn't ask. You hand him the cloth streaked with grease, and he tucks it into the toolkit. Later, he'll show you how to carve a gear tooth using a bone chisel, how to shape the pinion ring with slow, soft strokes of the rasp. But this morning, he simply pours you warm cider and offers a corner of bread. You eat in silence. There are no certificates, no guild apprenticeships for girls, but you are learning. And each morning, as the town slowly wakes beneath the tower, you are reminded that someone must hear the silence, that someone must wind the time, that someone, often unseen, must carry the bell forward. And you wonder, if the bell never rings, would the town still move? Or would it wait in place, confused by the absence of a sound it never thanked? Mid-morning settles like a shawl over the valley town. The bell has already rung twice, once for the 6th hour, again for the 9th. Elspeth listens from her family's workshop, a low building snug against the church tower. Through its open shutters, you can smell iron filings, beeswax, and damp linen. Time now is being kept, which means the town can go on. But for Elspeth, the day has only just begun. Because the bell tower is only one part of her world. The clockworks beneath it, the gears, rods, pulleys, weights, and pins require constant attention, as does the calendar drum, a wooden cylinder that tracks the saints' days and seasonal feasts, as does her father, whose hands are not as steady as they used to be. So she steps into her apron, ties back her hair with twine, and begins her daily round. And in this quiet, carefully wound world, time isn't just measured in hours. It's etched into every movement she makes. The workshop of tick and dust. Inside the clockmaker's shop, time feels thicker. Dust from filing iron settles on every surface. Tools hang from pegs in precise order. Hammers, tongs, tiny screw drills, half-finished escapements. A wheel press sits beside a stone bench. A rough wooden stool bears the scars of 100 sharpenings. Elspeth's task today is to polish a verge escapement, a small mechanism that helps control the speed of the clock's motion. It has to be filed with care. Too little and it will catch. Too much and it will slip. She sets to work slowly, rotating the piece with calloused fingers, smoothing its teeth with a goatskin pad soaked in ash and vinegar. Outside, the town moves through its own rhythms. The baker opens his shutters for the second round of loaves. The blacksmith bangs the forge to life. Children, free for the midday meal, dash between puddles in the alley. They don't hear the escapement ticking in the tower. They don't know what it is. But they trust it. Because at the next hour, the bell will ring again. And someone somewhere will stand up and say, "It's time." Hours you could smell. One of the oddities of keeping time in the late 15th century is that it was often smelled before it was heard. Before Elspeth even hears the bell chime noon, she smells. Roasting onions from the inn's kitchen. Yeasty air from the bakery's ovens. Wet wool steaming near a fireplace. Iron cooling on the anvil. Each scent marks part of the day as clearly as any clock. And yet, it's the bell that stitches it all together. 12 deep strikes echo from the tower. Elspeth's father listens, eyes closed. He nods once, the clutch is holding. That in their world is high praise. Because if the clutch that connects the driving weight to the hammer slips, the bell may miss its mark, or worse, double ring, sending the town into confusion. Last year it happened during Advent. For 5 days, townsfolk were convinced Christmas had arrived early. The priest had to explain gently that bells are not calendars. Not always. But when they ring true, they feel like truth itself. Women and timekeeping. Elspeth's role, though quiet, is unusual. Most town clocks are maintained by guild-trained men. Clockmaking is part of a closed world, regulated, conservative, suspicious of change. The Swiss Clockmakers Guild won't admit a woman for another 3 centuries. But small towns have their own rules. And when Matthias became too weak to climb the tower each morning, the town council agreed. If Elspeth could keep the clock running, they would accept her as an unofficial apprentice. So long as she never asked for pay. So long as she was always the clockmaker's daughter, and never the clockmaker herself. Which suited her for now, because she had the one thing no one else in town could claim. She knew what time felt like from the inside. She had touched every wheel, every rod. She had oiled the axles before they squealed. She had climbed the tower in wind and frost. And when the bell rang, she could feel it in her bones a few seconds before the sound ever reached her ears. The bell's gentle authority. At the 15th hour, Elspeth climbs the tower again. Not to wind it yet, but to check the slack in the drive rope. She brings her chalk. Her fingers run along the gears. She watches the flywheel spin down, counting to 5 before it halts. Still slow, still good. Below her, the town is pinned beneath long shadows. Shutters are closing. Chickens are herded in. Wool is brought down from the drying lines. No one looks up. But they all know another bell will ring soon. And the day will close behind it. And you pause here, high in the tower, watching the world from above in wonder. Does anyone below realize that the sound they trust most begins with a 13-year-old girl and a handful of grease? It is nearly dark now. The shadows in the bell tower are no longer shapes. They're just absence voids between the beams where even candlelight doesn't reach. Elspeth moves slowly, her footsteps muffled by dust, her breath visible in the cooling air. The bell has rung the 18th hour. 3 slow, solemn strikes. Enough to tell the tavern keeper to pour his final mugs. Enough to send the apprentice baker home through the snow. Enough to remind the priest to say his last prayer before sleep. But before Elspeth can sleep, she has one last task. The winding. Because if she doesn't reset the stone weight and gear drum now, the bell will not ring again before dawn. And the town, still asleep in its cottages, will wake confused, late, out of rhythm. The baker's bread might be late to rise. The priest might miss his first light prayer. A merchant might wonder if he dreamed the sun. So she climbs the tower once more, lantern swinging. And this time she listens differently. The sound of tension. The winding gear creaks with age. Elspeth sets the lantern on its peg, inserts the iron crank into the drum's side slot, and begins to turn. It's not easy work. Each rotation lifts the great stone weight a little higher. Each pull resists more. The iron groans. The rope tenses. A mouse scurries somewhere behind a joist. She stops every few turns to check for slack in the counterweight pulley. Then begins again. Not fast, but regular. Like the tick that lives in the center of the clock, though no one hears it, not even from inside the tower. She thinks, as she always does, how strange it is. The bell is loud, the clock is not. And yet without the silent workings beneath, the bell would never know when to speak. A machine that lives in silence, but keeps the rhythm of a town. The final strike of the day. At 20th hour, the final bell of the day rings. Only a single note. A long hollow tone that hangs in the cold. It tells those still awake that it's time to put out fires. To bar doors. To stop the spinning wheel and quench the candle. It tells Elspeth that her duty is complete. But she stays a moment longer. Her lantern's glow flickers against the stone. She watches the flywheel slow to a gentle halt. She wipes a patch of frost off the window and looks down over the rooftops. A few chimney tips still smoke. But the town is quiet. Not because they are watching the clock, but because they don't have to. Because someone always has. A timekeeper without a name. In the church ledger, her father's name is listed under the heading Custos Horarum, keeper of the hours. His work is recorded. His tools inventoried. His pay assigned quarterly. Elspeth's name is nowhere. But she knows which gear has the nick on its second tooth. She knows which part of the rope frays faster in the spring. She knows the order of the oiling. The weight of the hammer. the feel of the tower when the bell is 5 seconds from sounding. And while she may never be remembered in ink, the town moves by her rhythm. They sleep by her timing. They rise by her winding. And that, she thinks, is enough. Because timekeeping was never about being seen. It was about being steady. The bell in the mind. Later, in her straw-stuffed bed beside the workshop wall, Elspeth lies awake a moment, counting the seconds between the gusts of wind outside. She knows the exact number of turns left on the winding drum. She knows the weight will begin to drop again around the 3rd hour. And she smiles to herself, thinking, even in sleep, the bell will be ready. And somewhere far off, someone will hear it. And not think of her. And not need to. Because the sound will be there. As it always is. As if by magic. And you wonder how many of history's clearest signals were carried forward by people no one ever saw. Story 17. Too Many Steps. How Korean scholars measured mountains by foot in the Joseon era. The scholar begins to walk at dawn. His robe is simple, a soft cotton hanbok tied neatly at the waist. A conical hat shields his eyes from the rising sun. He carries no sword, no money pouch. Just a rolled-up parchment, a bamboo walking stick, and a small pouch of ink stones tucked inside his sleeve. His name is Yejeong, though it hardly matters. He will leave no monument. He is not a general, nor a poet, nor a king. He is a geographer. And his task is simple though long. To walk up a mountain. To walk down again. And to count every single step. Measuring by foot. In 16th century Joseon Korea, during the reign of King Yeongjang, royal scholars were tasked with an unusual and methodical duty, to map the kingdom's mountains using only human steps and written notes. There were no sextants, no compasses that could be trusted across valleys. And the mountains, many believed, were living things, ancient, stubborn, shrouded in cloud and folklore. But they were also crucial. Because Korea's waterways, trade routes, rice paddies, and defenses all depended on the folds of its terrain. And so, step by slow step, men like Yejeong were sent to walk them. Not for conquest, not for beauty, but for data. Painstaking, slow, foot-worn data. Counting with the body. He begins his ascent of Jirisan, one of the southern kingdom's tallest peaks. He counts aloud softly with each footfall. 1, 2, 3. At every 100 steps, he presses a black dot onto the edge of his parchment scroll. Every 1,000, he pauses to rest and scribes a small character, usually a reference point, like bending pine or stone pool. His measurements are not geometric. They are experiential. He notes how the incline feels on his calves, whether the breeze changes direction, how many breaths he needs to catch himself before continuing. His body is his measuring stick. And because of that, his notes are surprisingly reliable. Why scholars did the walking? This was not a job for peasants. In the Joseon dynasty, the scholar official class, or yangban, were charged with the governance and recording of the kingdom. They were Confucian in discipline, rigorous in method, and occasionally absurd in their commitment to bureaucratic accuracy. And while it may seem strange that highly educated men were ordered to spend weeks climbing hills, the reasoning was sound. Scholars could write, sketch, and standardize. They were less likely to exaggerate or embellish. They could be trusted to follow royal methodology. And most importantly, they could interpret what they saw. If a river cut a strange channel, a scholar would compare it to the classic texts. If a mountain slope mirrored an ancient omen, he would mark it, annotate it, and submit it in duplicate to the Ministry of Rites. This was not just cartography. It was a meditation on order. The weight of the scroll. By midday, Yejeong's parchment scroll is flecked with dots and notes. Pine tree fallen at 2,800 steps. Wind shifts westward after the fourth ridge. Spring water, bitter perhaps mineral-rich. View of 3 valleys, estimated 7 rai wide. A Korean rai is about 400 meters. He does not eat until his walking tally reaches 5,000 steps. He sits beneath a gnarled cedar, removes a small rice cake from his pocket, and sips from a bamboo flask of barley tea. He looks out over the ridges and notes the shape of the shadows, because even light is data. No one watches. No crowd awaits him at the summit. No one reads his notes today. He will descend, return to the provincial office in Jeonju, and transcribe the entire scroll into formal brushwork. His data will be copied again, checked, filed. It will join hundreds of others, mapping the ridges and rivers of a country stitched together by footfall. Many years from now, cartographers will be astonished at how close these step count maps are to topographic reality. But Yi Jiong won't know. He is still climbing, still counting, still brushing a new mark onto parchment every few hundred feet. And you wonder, how many mountains were first measured by someone too careful to ever call it climbing? The clouds roll in after midday. Thin mist trails down the mountain like slow smoke, draping over the trail and swallowing the peaks beyond. Yi Jiong pauses to adjust his hat, wipes his brush clean on a strip of linen, and squints up the path. He cannot see the summit, but he knows it's there. He doesn't need to see it, not now, because his scroll is already full of the land's intentions. Ridges, crests, clearings, stone outcrops, they are all captured as he's walked, not with lines and contours, but with dots, notes, and the precise rhythm of counted steps. And in the Joseon era, this was how geography became governance. Not through abstract mathematics, but through men walking, one step at a time, toward a better understanding of the land they served. How to draw a mountain without seeing it. Yi Jiong stops just before a rocky crest and unfurls the scroll he's been working on since morning. At first glance, it's chaotic dozens of black dots, scattered calligraphy, faint ink trails connecting natural features. But to trained eyes, it's a map. Not a bird's eye view, but a walker's eye view, a vertical narrative. It tells a story. At 1,200 steps, young birch grove. At 2,900, split rock with lichen. At 3,300, change in soil color, redder clay begins. At 4,200, steeper incline, path narrows to 2 feet wide. And soon he will estimate the entire mountain's height not in meters, but in steps, rest points, and hours walked. Later, a local magistrate may ask, how long will it take a messenger to cross this ridge? And thanks to his records, the answer will be 4 hours at scholar's pace, 3 with urgency, 5 with cargo. Time, geography, and terrain, all folded into a scroll. The language of the landscape. In Joseon-era maps, you won't find topographic lines or shaded relief. You'll find poetic summaries, deeply influenced by Confucian aesthetics and practical needs. Some examples. The mountain leans toward the west like a bowing official. Rocks resemble tiger's teeth, tread with care. Spring appears briefly at early thaw, gone by summer. Trees thin like a monk's hair above this ridge. Your scrolls follow this tradition. They blend natural observation with metaphorical insight, creating not just a document of space, but a philosophy of how humans exist within it. Each map is both a guide and a reflection. And it's not unusual for scholars to include a line of poetry at the end. In 10,000 steps, one forgets why they began. That too is part of the record. Why they walked so far. You might ask, why didn't they use horses? They could have, some did for lowland surveys, but horses were unreliable in steep terrain. More importantly, The imperial method emphasized human pace as the standard unit. The assumption was, most travelers would walk. Most military units marched on foot. Most merchants carried goods overland. So if you wanted to know the true measure of a mountain, not just its height, but its impact on the lives of those who crossed it, you had to walk it yourself. Yijiong walks not as a tourist, but as a representative of a system that values consistency, humility, endurance. A path is measured in how it changes you, not just how far it extends. The weight of a scroll. At camp that evening, Yi dries his ink stones by the fire. His legs ache. His scroll is now too long to unroll entirely without a second pair of hands. He has written nearly 2,000 characters today, each one brushed with slow precision, each a small act of faith that someone someday might read them. He eats plain rice and boiled greens. He watches the mist settle, and he records one final entry before sleeping. Bamboo groves whisper all night, wind steady from the east, one more day to summit. He folds the scroll, wraps it in oilcloth, and lies back on his bedroll. In the morning, he will walk again. But for now, the mountain is still. The steps already taken remain. And you wonder, when was the last time someone measured something important by walking it themselves? The summit is quiet. No flags, no markers, no carved stone to signify that Yijiong has reached the top, just wind and a view. Far below, the green ridges rise and fall like a sleeping dragon's back, disappearing into clouds. The valleys are dotted with rice terraces and tiled rooftops, their geometry barely visible through the haze. Yi stands still. He doesn't smile, doesn't raise his arms in triumph. He simply unrolls the scroll. Ink and paper meet once more. One final notation: summit, wind cuts from north, sound of hawk, no spring. And then he begins to descend. Because a scholar's work is not to conquer the mountain. It is to remember it. To translate the world into steps and strokes. To make something permanent from something impossibly vast. The scroll becomes the state. Back in Jeonju, weeks later, the scroll joins a small pile on a lacquered desk in the provincial archives. A clerk opens it, scans the dots and brushwork, and begins the process of formal transcription, a more polished version with annotations in Hanja characters, cross-references to older scrolls, and estimates of time, distance, and slope. Yi's field notes, rough and damp-stained, will be copied and stored. Later, parts of them may be sent to the capital in Hanseong, modern-day Seoul, where royal mapmakers compile dozens like it into new scrolls. Comprehensive, layered documents known as Yoji Seungram, topographical records of the Joseon state. Yi's walk silent, slow, mostly invisible, becomes part of a grander map. A paper kingdom that mirrors the real one. Each mountain ridge a series of careful notations. Each river curve informed by muddy footprints and mosquito-bitten fieldwork. A mountain's legacy without a name. Yijiong's name is not recorded on the official map. No monument is raised in his honor. No poet sings of his walk, or the aches in his knees, or the patience he showed when the mist obscured the summit trail for 3 days straight. But the road that now curves around that mountain, avoiding its steepest point, that decision came from his scroll. The military courier route that skips the eastern ridge, where Yi noted path too narrow for 3 men abreast. That's his mark. The irrigation terraces mapped from the peak's south slope. His observation of seasonal water flow, abundant in thaw, helped inform their location. Without ever making policy, Yi shaped it. Not through power, but through presence. Through showing up, walking far, and writing clearly. The art of knowing by walking. In later years, you would survey 3 more peaks. He would write dozens more scrolls. And though arthritis slowed his brush hand, and he eventually passed the crank of field work to younger scholars. He would still walk when he could because walking, for him, was a way of thinking. He believed, as many did then, that understanding the land was a form of loyalty, that no official could govern a province unless they had first felt it beneath their souls. And so, until his death, he walked not for glory, not for fame, but because he believed a scholar's first duty was to see clearly. And sometimes that meant counting every step, with a brush in one hand and the weight of the kingdom in the other. A final reflection. The Joseon maps created from such scrolls remain some of the most accurate pre-modern geographic documents in East Asia. They reflect more than elevation or distance. They reflect a philosophy, a belief that knowledge comes not from distance, but from immersion, not from ruling over the land, but from walking through it. And you pause to consider, in a world rushing to measure everything quickly, what might we relearn by simply walking slowly, deliberately, until the mountain tells us what it is? Story 18, Tea and Taxes, the unremarkable life of a Tang Dynasty toll clerk. The toll booth is not what you imagine. There are no gates, no wooden arms to lower, no guards with halberds demanding bribes, just a table, a scroll, and a middle-aged man with ink-stained fingers and an alarming ability to fall asleep upright. His name is Zhao Yun. He is a toll clerk, one of hundreds stationed along the trade arteries of the Tang Dynasty, specifically on a quiet stretch near the village of Wujiang, a few days' ride west of Suzhou. This place is no imperial capital, but it is important, because it sits between a bridge and a bend in the river. And every horse, cart, merchant, monk, tea seller, or traveling scholar must pass this point and pay the small but unyielding tax that funds everything from canal repairs to the occasional banquet for the prefect. Zhao Yun has worked this booth for 13 years. And if you ask him what he's seen, he'll shrug and say, mostly wheels, occasionally a very polite donkey. A clerk's daily tools. Each morning, Zhao boils water over a charcoal stove and prepares 2 pots of tea. One for himself, strong green, often reboiled. One for visitors, weaker, cleaner, and occasionally containing a few floating chrysanthemum petals to give the illusion of elegance. Next to the stove is the ledger, a long paper scroll reinforced with bamboo strips at each end. It records the passage of goods. 17 ox carts of millet, 3 bales of silk from Luoyang, 11 jars of fermented bean paste, 4 traveling monks with no taxable property, 1 magistrate's niece with 6 trunks uncertain contents, waived fee. He writes everything down with a bamboo brush dipped in ink. He grinds himself each week, cursing gently when the humidity curls the paper. Taxes by weight, not worth. In Zhao's world, everything has a weight. Literally, the tax isn't on the value of goods, but on their physical load. This is both easier and harder than you might think. Oxen pulling 2 barrels, simple, flat rate. Pack horses with oddly shaped bundles, complex, needs measuring. A man insisting his bronze mirror is practically weightless like a feather, argumentative, charged double. And because Tang officials care deeply about fare systems, Zhao has a set of standard stones pre-weighed and calibrated that he uses to settle disputes. Sometimes merchants will try to be clever. Add a little water to a rice sack. Stuff hollow spaces with grain. Even lash 3 small loads together and call it one unit. But Zhao has seen it all. And more importantly, he has nowhere else to be. So he will sit there, drink his tea, and measure every barrel, every bag, every goose in a crate. And write it all down. Without fuss. Without praise. Without forgetting what the toll really funds. The merchants who grumble about the tax often forget what it pays for. Zhao does not. He knows. It funds the team that clears flood debris from the wooden bridge. It pays for repairs to the milestone posts every li, about 500 meters. It supplies the firewood for night watch signal stations. It ensures that when a provincial exam official travels through, the roads are free of potholes. Even his own ink and paper are, technically, paid for by the taxes he collects. He finds this circular and amusing. He jokes, "Every time I write down a number, I'm also paying myself to do it." No one laughs usually, but Zhao laughs enough for everyone. When the river rises. In spring, when the rains are heavy, the river sometimes overflows and cuts off the road. On those days, Zhao closes the ledger, ties it in oilcloth, and sits beneath the awning watching frogs float by on bits of reed matting. Once a merchant tried to cross in a cart and had to be pulled out by villagers, soaked and fuming. Zhao merely noted in his personal journal, "Carts do not swim, people sometimes do." He did not charge the man a toll that day, but he did write him down, because even misfortunes must be recorded. And you wonder, if an entire empire relies on the quiet work of men like Zhao, why does history so rarely mention them? It is market day. Zhao Yun knows this not because of any proclamation or drumbeat, but because of the smell, a blend of pickled turnips, oiled axles, sheep, and dried squid drifting up from the bridge like incense from a forgetful altar. By sunrise, carts are already lining up. Some creak with the weight of barley sacks, others tilt from their uneven loads of ceramic bowls, hay, or firewood bundles. And Zhao, seated cross-legged behind his little table, picks up his brush, dips it into his stone ink dish, and begins to prepare for a long day of small entries. To the side, tea already reboiled twice. Ledger rolled open to yesterday's final mark. Pouch of standard weight stones, calibrated, though he suspects a few are light from age. A duck alive in a basket glaring at him. It will be a busy morning. One told many stories. The tax rate is low. Always has been. Just enough to avoid rebellion. Just high enough to remind merchants they are passing through the reach of the Tang state. A copper cash per donkey load. 3 cash per ox cart. 1 cash for anyone carrying goods by shoulder pole. No toll for the destitute, the religious, or the imperial messengers. Zhao rarely argues, but sometimes the travelers do. Take the old woman who insisted that her jar of eels was not cargo, but a companion. Do you charge for grandchildren? For parasols, no. Then why eels? Zhao raised an eyebrow, wrote 1 jar live eels claimed non-commercial, and waived the toll. He's not heartless, but he's very good at remembering who passes through. The next day, he noticed the same woman selling eel stew 3 li down the road. He added a quiet annotation beside her name. Next time charge double. Not out of spite, just out of principle. Because the ledger isn't just a scroll of numbers. It's a portrait of the kingdom, 1 ox cart at a time. The price of a duck. Mid-morning, a student from a nearby monastery arrives with a duck in a cage. He's headed to the prefecture for exams, dusty scrolls tucked under one arm, pride under the other. Zhao asks if the duck is for sale. The student laughs. "No, it's to keep me company." Zhao nods, says nothing. When the student passes, Zhao writes, "Duck not for sale, 1 cash toll applied anyway." That afternoon, the duck escapes in the prefecture square and causes enormous commotion during the literary examination. The prefect's cousin trips over it and falls into a pot of ink. Zhao never hears this, but the duck reappears 2 days later, wandering near his booth. He lets it sit beside the teapot. Neither of them say much. Why the toll matters. Most travelers assume the toll is just an inconvenience. They don't realize it's how the empire sees itself. Because without these quiet records, the capital wouldn't know which roads were busiest. Armies wouldn't know where they could march fastest. The Ministry of Agriculture wouldn't know how much rice was moving between valleys. And the emperor's officials wouldn't know whether a new tax would cause hardship or go unnoticed. Zhao Yun's scrawls might never make it to Chang'an, but the patterns they form will. In tiny script, dotted with grease spots and T-rings, he is writing the pulse of a nation. A toll clerk's philosophy. After the rush dies down, Zhao leans back and counts his copper coins. Then he rolls up the scroll, leaving it to dry beneath the stove. He reaches for his personal notebook, not the official ledger, but a thin booklet where he writes his thoughts. Today he records. 1 barrel of salted plums tipped over, child cried. Merchant cursed. Both blamed gravity. Man claimed his wife was part of the cargo. She disagreed. Duck returned still unpaid. He grins. Clerks like Zhao are not poets, but they have their own rhythm, their own way of capturing life. And you consider, if an empire's greatness is measured by its generals and poets, then who records the toll it takes to maintain it? 1 step, 1 duck, 1 ledger mark at a time. The sun dips behind the hills, casting the bridge into long shadow. Zhao Yun lifts the clay lid from his teapot and frowns at the swirl of leaf fragments floating on the surface. He pours the last few ounces into a cracked bowl, sips slowly, and glances down at the open ledger on the table. Today's list stretches nearly to the margin. 22 donkeys, 14 ox carts, 7 baskets of dried shrimp, 1 porcelain merchant with 5 crates and a nervous laugh, 2 monks carrying nothing but umbrellas, 1 duck briefly missing, now accounted for. Another unremarkable day, but also in its own quiet way, another small act of empire. Dusk in the details. The light fades fast after the 6th hour. Zhao moves deliberately now, brushing each last entry with care. His brush strokes are slower than they were this morning, not sloppy, but unhurried, like someone finishing a story whose ending never changes. His fingers leave faint smudges on the bamboo-weighted edge of the scroll. He doesn't bother wiping them off. No one will see them. Tomorrow, he'll wrap the scroll, tie it with twine, and send it with the courier to the local magistrate's office, where it will join dozens of others in a lacquered chest that smells faintly of mildew and mouse droppings. Most will never be read, but they will be stored. And in the Tang dynasty, that means they mattered. Because if something is written, stored, and stamped, it becomes real. Even if it's just a duck tax. A clerk's quiet endings. A farmer passes, late and flustered, pulling a cart piled with cabbages. Zhao raises an eyebrow. You're late. The wheel cracked, had to patch it with rope, the farmer pants. Do I still owe the toll? Zhao considers this. Technically, the road closes at sundown. Technically, he could wave him through. But the cart creaks heavily, and the cabbages are stacked high and damp with dew. He gestures toward the scales, sets the standard stones in place, and helps the man unload. No ceremony, just habit. The weight is measured, the fee collected 3 copper coins. The farmer bows deeply, more from fatigue than gratitude, and disappears down the path. Zhao writes 1 final line on the scroll. Cabbages late, paid anyway. He blows gently on the ink to dry it. Then he stops writing. The toll booth sleeps. As night falls, Zhao extinguishes the lantern, packs away his inkstone, and folds a cloth over the ledger. He places a heavy stone on top to keep the moisture out. His tea bowl is empty. The duck is gone again. The road is quiet, save for the crickets and the occasional slosh of water from the river bend. He lights a stick of incense not for ceremony, but to keep mosquitoes away, and leans back on the wooden bench, watching the smoke curl upward into the rafters of the little thatched shelter. He's not meditating. He's just not moving. He does this most nights, because stillness is part of his rhythm. And somewhere in the dark, he thinks, another toll clerk is sitting behind another table, writing down another list of bales, barrels, beasts, and bundles. Together, they form a scattered, ink-stained network that holds the great Tang dynasty together, not through power, but through patience. Not through fame, but through everyday care. A reflection written in ink. Zhao once told a younger apprentice, who lasted exactly 3 days, "A toll clerk isn't here to stop the road, we're here to notice it." He wasn't being profound, but he wasn't wrong. In a time of emperors, poetry, and war, someone still had to weigh the firewood, still had to count the baskets, still had to know how many steps from the river to the bridge. And so Zhao Yun sits, one last time that day, and watches the moonlight fall across his scroll. And you wonder, what if history's true foundation isn't made of battles and edicts, but line after line of small, boring truth? Story 19. The Scribe's Lunch, Office Work in a 12th Century Cairo Bureau. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat. The mat is not decorative. It's to protect your robes from the ever-blowing grit of Cairo's dusty breeze, which enters the bureau building uninvited and settles between every document, every reed pen, and every bowl of lentil paste. You are Ahmed ibn Khalil, a mid-level scribe working in one of the city's Diwan offices, a government bureau responsible for tracking taxes, trade permits, and various bewilderingly specific payments made to the Fatimid state. It is the year 1135 CE. Your tools are modest. A pot of black ink, thinned with vinegar to prevent insects. A reed pen trimmed just this morning. A box of sand for drying the writing. A small knife to sharpen the pen when it drags or misbehaves. You also have a short stack of date sugar biscuits tucked into a cloth by your elbow. Because it will be a long day. And someone will, eventually, ask you to rewrite something for the 3rd time. Bureaucracy, the Cairo edition. The office is a single open room, cooled slightly by thick whitewashed walls. The furniture is minimal. Long wooden writing tables, bundles of papyrus and linen paper tied with dyed cords, and brass ink wells that have been passed down through a dozen previous scribes. It's not a grand office, but it is important. Because this is the Diwan al-Jayash, the bureau tasked with tracking military expenditures, camel rental contracts, and market stall taxes for Cairo's western districts. No army moves without your ledgers. No merchant opens a shop without your paperwork. No stonemason gets paid for aqueduct repairs unless you mark the receipt with your personal seal. You, in short, write the state into existence line by line, column by column. And though no one thanks you, you know this. How a day begins in ink. You start by copying yesterday's final page of figures into the master register. 6 dinars to the copperworkers for canal tools. 2 dirhams returned from surplus olive oil purchase. 17 coppers received from goat merchant, stall 19, Khan al-Khalili. Each entry must be written in a precise hand, using the standard chancery script, neither too flowery, wastes ink, nor too rigid, hurts the eyes of whoever has to check your work later. You dry each line with sand. You blow across it gently. And you pause before the next entry because the sun is now creeping through the small window, illuminating your table, and you can already feel your knees tightening beneath your robe. So you stretch. You sip water. And you wait for the first complaint to arrive. Scribes in the art of polite correction. Mid-morning, A younger scribe from the Diwan al-Turez textile permits appears, sheepish, holding a sheet with smudged ink and a note written in the wrong column. Could you, perhaps, redo this page for the master file? You read it, frown, then nod. Because this is the game. Mistakes are not punished harshly, but they are corrected endlessly, and a good scribe never resists rewriting. So you set aside your own work, sharpen your pen, and begin the entry again. This time more carefully. This time with better spacing. This time knowing that even if this sheet disappears into a box no one will open for years, its perfection is still the job. Lunch Cairo style. When the call to prayer echoes from the mosque across the courtyard, scribes begin to shuffle, stretch, and unwrap their midday meals. You reach for your bundle. Lunch is simple. Flatbread warm and chewy. Pickled turnip slices. Soft dates split open with your thumb. A little spiced cheese, already melting in the heat. You eat while balancing a ledger on your knees, half reading yesterday's copywork and half listening to the others argue about whether the tax on barley carts should increase in flood season, whether the Diwan of water distribution is 2 days behind again, whether the ink from the Eastern scribe stall smells oddly of fish again. These are your colleagues. You may never dine with an emir or a merchant prince, but you know what every trader owes, what every gate pass costs, and how many camels have been taxed since the new vizier took office. In your world, that is power, measured not in coins, but in careful handwriting. What is written endures. Before the sun begins to lower, you return to your stack. You check today's numbers. You tally the ink pots. You prepare tomorrow's fresh folios, dusted, pressed, and lined by hand. Outside, Cairo bustles with poets and imams, and coin-stamp deals in marketplaces. But here, behind a quiet table, the records of all that life wait for you to catch up. And as you dip your pen again, you wonder, will the future remember the world as it truly was, or only as you wrote it down? The sun now hangs overhead like a coin about to drop. Afternoon in the bureau brings with it the second wave of paperwork, the return of clerks with unsigned forms, the complaints from market officials about missing tallies, and the quiet, inescapable understanding that no one is going home early. You, Ahmed ibn Khalil, are once again seated behind your writing table, pen in hand, tea long cold. There is a saying among scribes in Cairo: we don't finish our work, we simply run out of daylight. Today will be no exception. The arrival of the receipts. At precisely the 3rd hour past noon, a low-ranking military quartermaster shuffles into the office holding a wooden box tied with wax string. He sets it on your desk like a wounded animal. 17 camel fees, he mutters, for the supply train near Fiume. All need stamped receipts. You untie the box. Inside, 17 folded orders, each marked with smudged ink, each requiring careful transcription, stamping, and of course a clean copy for the Bureau's own ledgers. You raise an eyebrow. 17. All the same. Almost, but not quite. Because the names change, and so do the dates. And that means you cannot copy and paste, not in ink, not in this century. You sigh. You stretch your fingers. And you begin stamping the state into place. Each receipt follows the same basic formula. This certifies that X camels were requisitioned from Y quartermaster for the purpose of supply transfer to Z outpost on date D, authorized under office of the Diwan al-Jayash, Cairo. Your job is to rewrite each version by hand. Check that the amounts match the originals. Dry the ink with sand. Fold and seal each with a bureau stamp. The stamp itself is carved from ivory and attached to a cord that hangs from a wooden peg behind your desk. You dip it gently into red paste, press it onto the margin of each page, then blow across it lightly to help it set. It smells faintly of vinegar and almonds. 17 times the same rhythm. Ink, sand, fold, stamp, place in pile. Satisfying in its own quiet way. Like folding laundry, if laundry carried the authority of a caliph. The scribe's quiet authority. A younger scribe once asked you, half joking, "What happens if we write something wrong?" You told him without smiling, "Then history walks with a limp." Because while no one may care how many goats pass through Gate 7 on a Tuesday in Rajab, someone might care 50 years from now. Or 100. Or not at all. But the point is not knowing which ink will matter. The point is writing it as if it all matters. That's what gives the bureaucracy its spine. Not brilliance. Consistency. Afternoon interruptions. A familiar voice calls from the hallway, a fellow clerk from the neighboring bureau. He enters holding a lemon tart wrapped in waxed cloth. Trade for 2 dry dates and a receipt copy. You accept. Because even scribes must barter their way to something sweet once in a while. You sit, nibbling slowly, brushing crumbs from the edge of your scroll. You glance down at the nearly finished stack of receipts. Only 3 more. And then perhaps a brief break. Perhaps even a nap behind the ledgers. No. Unlikely. But sweet to imagine. A moment between ink lines. As the light begins to shift toward evening, the bustle outside grows louder. You hear metal shutters closing, a child calling after a runaway sandal, a song drifting from a nearby courtyard where someone stirs lentils in a clay pot. And here you are, still bent over your scroll, still drawing lines, still coaxing clarity out of smudges. And you pause not for long, just a heartbeat in wonder. What empire has ever endured that did not rest on the shoulders of men who simply kept showing up with a pen? The final line is drawn. You lift your reed pen, tap it twice against the rim of the ink pot more out of habit than necessity, and set it down beside your stack of finished receipts. The sun is now low enough that its light no longer reaches your desk directly. Only a golden haze lingers on the floorboards, dancing with the dust. This, you've come to learn, is the hour when errors multiply. Eyes strain. Ink pools. Letters lean sideways. So you sit still for a moment, listening. The scratching of other scribes slows. The clatter of market carts fades. Somewhere outside, the muezzin's call to prayer floats upward, echoing through Cairo's alleys like the city's breath exhaled. You take it as a cue. It's time to seal the day. Sealing the books. You unroll the register one final time, scanning today's entries. 17 camel requisitions. 6 stall permits, 1 with corrected name. 2 scrolls from the Waterworks Bureau, both awaiting reply. 1 inquiry about a goat tax no one understands. Each line has been dried, stamped, and checked. There is no ceremony to closing the day's register, just a wooden dowel slipped through the scroll's end, a length of cloth wrapped snugly, and a tie fastened with one firm tug. Still, it feels like something sacred. Not because of what it is, but because of what it means. This scroll now becomes part of Cairo. Not the city of domes or minarets, but the city of paper. The city of calculation, of consistency, of men who do not forget. The city that runs not only on water and dates and poetry, but on documents. A small conversation about nothing. As you gather your ink stones, another scribe leans over and mutters, "Do you think anyone will ever read our ledgers 100 years from now?" You don't answer immediately. Instead, you blow gently across your fingers, flecked with red wax and ink dust. You flex your knuckles, feeling the stiffness that never quite leaves. Then you shrug. Perhaps not, but if they do, at least the camel counts will be correct. He laughs quietly. That's all the answer you need. Because writing history isn't always about drama. Sometimes it's about getting the barley weight right. The long shadow of routine. You walk home through narrow alleys, your sandals slapping quietly on the stones. The smells of spiced lentils, charcoal smoke, and warm flatbread tug at your senses. As you pass the gatehouse, a night guard nods and says, "Still keeping Cairo together, one line at a time." You smile, but say nothing. Not because it's false, but because it's oddly true. Your work isn't flashy. It isn't noble in the way poets claim. But it's what ensures that the soap seller has a license, that the bridge builders get paid, and that when the caliph's court inquires about grain imports from Aswan, someone somewhere can open a scroll and answer with confidence. Because you wrote it. Because you were there. Final reflection. Back in your small apartment, you light a lamp and unroll your personal notebook, a modest thing, filled with crooked lines and ink blots. Not for the Diwan, just for you. You jot down today's date. And a quiet note. 3 sandstorms this month. Still no reply from the Diwan of Canals. Tariff adjusted on fig shipments. Duck sighting in the southern courtyard. And you think, perhaps this too is worth remembering. Because history is not only shaped by caliphs, generals, or poets. Sometimes it's shaped by a man hunched over a desk, fixing a smudge no one else would have noticed. And you wonder, what will remain of our world when only the ledgers are left behind? Story 20, of Bread and Soot, the daily schedule of a London chimney sweep, 1802. The city stirs before the sun. It's not the church bells that wake you, nor the click of hooves over cobblestones, but the smell of bread crust and soot, drifting through the morning damp like an old argument. Your name is Thomas Meeks, though few use it. Most just call you Sweep. You are 13, possibly 14, you're not entirely sure, and you've been climbing chimneys for 5 years. You live in London, in a narrow alley off Bishopsgate. The year is 1802, and your life runs on a strict schedule dictated not by clocks or school bells, but by coal smoke, grime, and the demands of gentlemen who insist their fireplaces be spotless by breakfast. Wake, eat, run. You wake just after 5. The master's house smells of damp wool and boiled oats. You sleep in a shared attic loft, curled under a horsehair blanket with 3 other boys. There's little ceremony in getting up, just the stiff crack of knees and the quiet rush for bread heels left on the kitchen hearth. Breakfast is 1 piece of stale bread, 1 gulp of water, sometimes warm, 1 good shove out the door by the master. Your first job of the day is often the worst. A tall flue, narrow, twisting, and still warm from last night's fire. The kind that scorches your knees if you linger. The kind that clogs you with soot in the lungs, eyes, ears, and everything else. But you climb it anyway. Because that's the job. Because you were born small enough to fit, and stayed small enough not to escape. The climb begins. At your first stop, a banker's townhouse near the Royal Exchange, you kneel, check the sweep rods, though the master insists boys are better than brushes, and crawl into the flue like a spider returning to its nest. The world goes black almost immediately. Your fingers find footholds worn smooth by others before you. You've learned to move without seeing 1 knee, 1 elbow, 1 foot jammed sideways to brace yourself. The soot is everywhere, warm, oily, soft, like something rotting and whispering all at once. You reach the bend in the flue, dig at the hardened creosote with your scraper, and drop it down the shaft. It lands with a sound like wet coins. You cough, always coughing, but never long enough to stop working. You climb higher. Sometimes you imagine the chimney is alive, that it breathes, groans, shifts with the heat. You imagine it might eat you if you're not careful. So you hurry. At the top, the faintest square of light tells you you've reached the chimney pot. You push your brush through out into the open and tap twice. That's the signal. Job done. Back down you go. Covered in soot. But alive. Soot as currency. Back on the ground, the master waits with a sack. You shake out your clothes, wipe your face with a scrap of cloth, and dump the collected soot into the sack. He nods pleased. Because soot is valuable. Sold by the bushel to farmers, who believe it makes fine fertilizer. Your labor is dirt cheap, but the soot fetches a price. You are quite literally paid in filth. If you're lucky, he gives you a copper. If you're very lucky, a lady of the house hands you a broken biscuit or a half-melted toffee from the kitchen tray. You store it in your shirt for later. It melts anyway. Not the only sweep. You're not alone in this. Every street in London has boys like you. Tiny limbs, bent backs, eyes ringed with coal shadow. You know their names: Nicky, Tom Tom, Red Alf. You nod when you pass. You share stories in the alley behind St. Bride. Like who got stuck last week in a brewer's chimney and had to be pulled out by his ankles. Or who dropped their brush into a hearth mid-service and got cuffed so hard their tooth loosened. Or who claims they found a shilling once near a magistrate's fireplace and swallowed it before the master noticed. All true. All probably lies. All worth remembering. Because in a job where nothing is written down, where your name might vanish in soot, the stories are the only ledger you've got. And you wonder, what would this city look like if the chimneys told the stories instead of the parlors? It's nearing noon now, and your knees ache. Your shirt, once beige, now a uniform black, clings to your back with a film of sweat and soot. You smell like coal tar, old feathers, and chimney bricks warmed by last night's fire. London is louder by midday. Horses clatter past on wet cobblestones. Cartwheels splash through muck. Street hawkers shout about eels, cheap umbrellas, and penny pamphlets filled with things you'll never read. You press your back against the bricks of a butcher's wall, nibbling a bit of bread salvaged from your pocket. The crust is laced with soot. You eat it anyway. The master is off collecting fees from the last 2 houses. You have 7 minutes. Maybe 10. Then it's off to the next chimney. And another after that. Because no matter how black your hands, there's always another flue in need of a boy. The parlors you'll never sit in. You've swept chimneys in every kind of house. Small bakers' homes where the hearth is cracked and the flue is crooked. Grand parlors with wallpaper of gold and blue. Townhouses where the lady of the house doesn't speak to the help, especially not boys covered in soot. You see these homes in pieces, never whole. A velvet curtain draped over a sill. A boot scraper in the marble foyer. A child's doll forgotten under a side table, watching you from the shadows. Sometimes, when you're crawling up inside the flue, you can hear voices through the soot-blackened walls. Heavens, it's still smoky. Open the window, would you? I do wish they'd send a smaller one next time. They don't know you hear them. They don't know you're there at all, really. And that, perhaps, is the strangest part. You keep the house clean, but you're never allowed to be part of it. Like a shadow without a wall. Injuries you don't mention. No one talks about the burns, or the bruises on your rib where the chimney narrowed too fast, or the cut on your shoulder from a broken tile where the flue had cracked in last winter's frost. You don't mention when your nails turn purple, or when you cough black and it stays on your tongue. There are other boys worse off. Everyone knows of someone who got stuck, or who fell, or who came out coughing and never stopped. There's even a whisper about a boy who climbed in during a rainstorm and never climbed back down. The master says he was lazy serves him right. You say nothing, because the truth wouldn't help. Because what matters is getting to the next house, and fitting inside, and getting out again. The master's ledger. The master is a man of numbers and cuffs. He carries a leather notebook with the names of all the homes you've cleaned, how many times this season, how much was paid. Your name is not in it. None of the boys' names are. But you exist in margins. Boy 2 big swap for younger. Send smaller one for east chimney. Bring brush just in case. Sometimes you think about asking him what would happen if you grew too big. You already notice the tight squeeze in certain flues. You've had to breathe shallower. You've had to scrape your elbows more often. You think maybe 3 more months, 4 at best. And then what? You don't know. Neither does he. Or maybe he does and simply doesn't say. One fire too warm. At the final house of the day, the fireplace is still warm, too warm. You touch the bricks and feel heat pulsing through them like breath. You hesitate. The master glares. It's just embers, get in. You bite your tongue. You crawl inside. The flue is slick with ash, the edges glistening faintly from last night's smoke. Your knees find the familiar holds. Your fingers press into soot-packed ridges. It feels alive. Like the chimney is waiting. Halfway up you pause. A bird's nest. You hear the faint crunch of twigs. Then a cough not yours. Then nothing. You listen again. Still nothing. You climb past it, brushing away the nest. It crumbles easily. You reach the top. Push the brush through the pot. Signal twice. And descend. Your shirt is wet. But you're out. Alive. And the master looks bored. A moment that passes. Back on the street, a woman hands you a coin. Not to you directly, she places it in the master's gloved hand. He tucks it into his coat without a word. But as she turns away, she offers you a scrap of something sweet wrapped in paper. You take it. You don't say thank you. You don't need to. You both know it will melt before you get home. But you eat it anyway. Because sweetness is rare. And because there's always more soot tomorrow. And you wonder, if chimneys could talk, what would they remember more clearly? The fire inside, or the boy who cleaned it out each day before anyone else woke up? Evening comes not with fanfare, but with the slow dimming of the smoke. The fires in the homes have cooled. Candles flicker behind thick glass panes. Gaslight pools in corners of the better streets. And chimney pots, once hot enough to blister a hand, now sit quiet against the sky like stone hats worn by sleeping giants. You, Thomas Meeks, are finished for the day. Your fingers are cracked. Your breath is shallow. Your shirt is stiff with soot. And still you walk. Back down alleys of soft brick and cracked flagstones, through fog and coal haze, back to the master's lean-to house behind the butcher. It is not home, but it is where you sleep. Tonight the master is counting coins near the fire. He says nothing as you enter. You don't expect him to. You and the other boys peel off your sooty layers and sit in silence, legs crossed, ribs aching, sharing what little food has been saved. A crust of bread scraped of mold. A half apple bruised but still sweet. A tin mug of milk, thinned with water but cool. You eat quickly. Then lean back against the wall. Then close your eyes. But not to sleep. Not yet. Not before remembering the rooftops. The city from above. There's a moment brief and rare when you reach the top of a chimney and pause, just for a breath, before waving the brush. From that height the city unfolds. Rows of terraced roofs like fish scales. smoke rising like gray silk ribbons, church spires stabbing upward into fog, ships bobbing along the Thames, their sails pulled in tight. You never stay long, too dangerous, too cold. But for that one moment, you are above it all. Above the masters, above the ledgers, above the noise. Just a soot-blackened boy on a soot-blackened ledge, looking down at a world that barely knows you exist. That memory carries you through the night. Not pride, not glory. Just the simple knowledge that once today, you stood taller than the rooftops. Even if only for a second. What the night sounds like. Later, as the boys snore gently beside you, you lie awake listening. You hear the soft scuff of rats under the floorboards, the drip of water from the cracked gutter outside, a coach clattering by too fast on wet stones, and the creak of the master's chair as he dozes, mouth open, coin still in hand. You think of your own hands. You rub your thumb against your palm and feel the ridges, the blisters. You're growing taller, too tall maybe. The flues are already narrower than they used to be. Soon the master might say, "No good to me anymore." And then what? No answers come. Only the city's breathing. Heavy, slow, unaware. A ledger with no ink. No one records your work. There are no certificates for chimneys cleaned. No tally for hours crawled in ash. No parchment bearing your name. But in some homes unseen, unspoken, you've left a mark. A flue that won't catch fire. A hearth that burns clean. A house that sleeps easier because the smoke rises the way it should. And perhaps that is enough. Because not all work is remembered. But some of it still matters. Final reflection. Before you sleep, you turn your face to the wall and whisper a single line from a song you half remember, taught by an older sweep who vanished one winter. Up the flue and back again, black as coal and thin as rain. You close your eyes. And you wonder. Story 21. The dull brilliance of Roman plumbing inspectors, pipes, lead and low drama in the empire. You stand beneath the midday sun, squinting at a marble wall that should not be damp. It is. A faint sheen glistens along the corner of the atrium, just beside the fresco of Bacchus drinking far too much wine. This is not a decorative leak. This is a problem. You are Lucius Decimus Alienus, official Plumbarius Inspectorum, a certified Roman plumbing inspector, sent by the Office of Aqueduct Oversight to investigate suspicious moisture in the villa of a retired senator, with a fondness for underfloor heating and olive oil in all things. You carry a small hammer, a wax tablet, a stylus, a long-suffering expression, because plumbing in Rome is rarely glorious and always leaky. And you are very, very good at finding out where. An empire of water. To most of Rome, you are invisible. But the city itself knows you. Because Rome runs not just on roads and legions, but on pipes. 9 aqueducts feed the capital, delivering thousands of gallons of water each day to baths, fountains, latrines, households, bakeries, laundries, and fishmongers. Each drop must be carried, measured, diverted, documented. And when something drips where it shouldn't or doesn't flow where it must, they send you. Not a soldier, not a senator, a man with a stylus and a good ear for dripping. Today's case, Villa Levia. The owner is out. Of course. But the steward has been instructed to show you in, and not to speak unless addressed. You ask your first question anyway. When did the dampness appear? The steward hesitates. 5 days ago, after the senator bathed unusually long. You make a note. You crouch beside the wall, tap gently with your hammer and listen. Hollow. Then full. then hollow again. You nod to yourself. Lead pipe slightly misaligned, possibly warped by thermal expansion from the hypocaust, the underfloor heating system, very common in villas built too close to sulfur springs. You scratch a quick note on your tablet. Check junction, may require resealing with resin and linen thread. Roman pipework, artful if unstable. Roman pipes are made of lead plumbum, hence your title, plumbarius. The work of connecting them requires patience, a steady hand, access to enough wax seals to choke a small goat. And while the flow of water is glorious when it works, when it fails, it does so quietly. A dribble, a drip, a dark stain behind a mosaic of Neptune. So your job is not dramatic. It is damp and meticulous. You move through the villa now, checking. The lavatrina toilet flushes properly. The impluvium indoor basin, clean but the catch drain is cracked. The pipe to the kitchen cistern, possibly limescaled, flow weak. You dip a finger into the basin. Taste the water. Too much lead. No, but close. You make another note. Recommend clay-piped filter before kitchen usage. Owner won't listen. He never does. The scrolls never lie. Back at the entrance, you consult the properties official water grant scroll, issued by the Curator's Aquarum, the Municipal Water Authority. It lists total water allotment, number of authorized outlets, pipe diameter not to exceed 5 digits across, assigned aqueduct branch, Aqua Marcia. All appears correct, except you notice an unauthorized spur, a small pipe running off toward the slave quarters. Not on the scroll. Likely added after construction. You make a note. Then cross it out. Then rewrite it in smaller script. Because reporting it could cost someone a whipping or worse. But ignoring it could cost you your post. You sigh. And document it with just enough vagueness to appease both Caesar and conscience. Secondary spur observed. Possible overflow channel. No leak detected. Not all heroes wear togas. By late afternoon you found 1 minor leak, 2 misaligned joints, 1 illegal branch, 3 fountain spouts in need of descaling, and a missing drain cap that has likely been stolen by a cat. You prepare your final note for the steward. Repairs needed, non-urgent, recommend shutting off flow overnight to relieve pressure. He nods, says nothing. You leave. Back into the sunlight. Back into the city of columns and carts, of temples and shouting bakers, of marble and filth, where millions rely on water that comes and goes without thanks. A final note of moisture. As you walk along the street, a boy runs past with a bucket sloshing over the edge. You step aside just in time to avoid a splash, and glance down at your tunic, relieved. Still dry for now. And you think, in a city that praises poets and generals, who will remember the man who found the leak behind the fresco and saved the senator's wine cellar from mildew? Perhaps no one. But tomorrow another pipe will shift, another drain will clog, and another wall will sweat. And they will send for you. Because someone must keep Rome dry. The day after the villa inspection begins with a minor crisis. Not dramatic, just wet. The public fountain near the Forum, one of the smaller basins installed under a previous praetor, has developed an unfortunate habit of overflowing during the midday rush. Water, intended to gracefully arc from bronze dolphin spouts, now burbles out like a dyspeptic ox and sloshes into the street. You, Lucius Decimus Alienus, plumbing inspector and reluctant hydrologist, are summoned again. Not because anyone is angry, but because someone must be blamed. And in Rome, blame flows downhill often faster than water. A basin too full. You arrive to find one apprentice scribe arguing with a baker about slipperiness, two municipal workers half-heartedly sweeping puddles, one dog wet and delighted, a loose stone channel misaligned by half an inch. You crouch by the edge, touch the lip of the drain, cool but not blocked. So where, you wonder, is the backflow coming from? You stand, brush grit from your knees, and sigh in the long-suffering tone known to all Roman public officials. Has anyone checked the settling tank? Blank stares. You mutter something about amateurs, signal for your tools, and prepare to get your sandals dirty. Under the streets over the patients. The settling tank is a simple stone chamber beneath the fountain, designed to trap sand, coins, and the occasional bone fragment before water enters the main cistern. It is also today full of shredded papyrus, likely tossed in by a careless washerwoman, or perhaps swept in from the bathhouse next door where scrolls are sometimes repurposed as hand towels. You reach in with your iron hook, fish out the sodden clumps. They disintegrate. You frown, not because it's disgusting, you're used to worse, but because someone, somewhere, spent hours copying those scrolls, and now they're blocking Rome's finest public plumbing. You remove what you can, instruct the workers to dredge the rest, and note the incident in your log. Blockage, organic papyrus waste, recommends straining grates, unlikely to be implemented. You're right, of course. No one listens to a plumbing inspector until the water smells like fish guts and funeral offerings. Paperwork and lead and ink. Back at your bureau, you settle into the most feared part of any inspector's job, the scroll report. Every leak, overflow, adjustment, or public scolding must be recorded in the official log of the officium, aquarum, a long scroll of entries so dry even Cicero might have nodded off reading them. Today's entry includes the villa's illegal pipe spur, noted delicately, the fountain overflow, 2 fountain spout limeskillings, 1 collapsed drain cap cause, weather and neglect, a dog unregistered, causing general aquatic disruption. You finish the entry, press your seal into the wax, and pass the scroll to the courier. He groans audibly when he sees the length. You say nothing. It's his turn now. Everyone has their burden. The pipe merchants and the bribe that was. Later that afternoon, a merchant of lead fittings visits your office uninvited. He carries a sample joint of unusually shiny lead, a tray of dates from Hispania, a tone of voice just below honest. Inspector Lucius, surely you'd be curious to see how our new pipe alloys reduce buildup. Perhaps you'd recommend them in your next public works report. You raise an eyebrow, glance at the dates. They smell delicious. You push them gently back across the desk. We use the city standard, no substitutions, the report stands. He nods, face frozen in a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. He leaves. The dates remain. You give them to the custodian. Because if you eat them, you'll wonder forever whether you've just been bought with fruit. And if there's one thing worse than sewage, it's the gray zone of loyalty. The sound of a dry wall. As the day closes, you revisit the villa to check the plaster patch. It's dry now. The leak has stopped. You tap the wall with your knuckles. Solid. The steward bows slightly. You record one last note. No active leak. Owner to monitor. Recommends spring reinspection. You've done your job. Rome remains dry, at least the parts that matter. And as you step back out into the Roman dusk, you catch the glint of water running smoothly from a lion's mouth at the fountain. You nod to yourself, not because anyone notices, but because that's how you measure success. Not in praise, not in coin, but in silence, in dryness, in things that do not go wrong. And you wonder how much of Rome's greatness lies not in what was built, but in what quietly didn't leak. Dawn returns with its usual sounds. A vendor shouting about honeyed dates, the iron squeal of a bakery gate, a fountain gurgling back to life in the square. You, Lucius Decimus Alienus, have been awake for some time. Plumbing inspectors do not rise early out of ambition, but because the city never stops dripping. Today's task is unusual. You've been summoned to inspect the Aqua Claudia, one of the great aqueducts that crosses the eastern hills before entering the heart of Rome. Not because of a known fault, but because a senator's nephew heard a strange hum during his countryside picnic. It is, of course, absurd. But absurdity is political currency. And so off you go. The arch that carries thirst. The Aqua Claudia stretches over 50 miles from the springs near Subiaco, carved and carried over valleys, beneath ridges, across bridges, and through the teeth of Rome herself. It is not beautiful in the way temples are. But to you, it is sacred. A kind of God that doesn't speak, only delivers. You walk beside it now, your footsteps muffled by dust. The stone channel is elevated here, a mighty wall of arches that slice the sky with quiet confidence. You run a hand along the conduit wall, feeling. Fine cracks normal. Bits of moss expected. A faint warmth from the sun, which the water ignores. You tap. You listen. And yes, there it is. A hum. Just not the one the senator's nephew imagined. This one is ancient. The slow echo of water on stone, carried from springs miles away. A hum that speaks of centuries, of thirst, of Rome's stubborn refusal to go dry. You smile and take out your wax tablet. No fault found. Reassure senator's family. Recommend fewer picnics near aqueducts. The invisible empire. Rome is filled with triumphal arches, processions, and myths written in bronze. But you walk through its wet veins, the parts no poet bothers with. You know which latrines drain too slowly in summer, which villa's bathhouse floods in spring, which baker cheats by tapping extra flow from the cistern. Your empire isn't glorious. It's functional, and because of that it endures. You once asked your mentor, long since retired, how do you know when you've done the job well? He'd scratched his head, squinted toward a cracked ceiling, and said, if no one mentions the water for a week, you've won. And he was right. No applause. No statues. Just a dry cellar. An honest leak. Later that evening, you're called to the public latrines near the baths of Titus. A small girl, barefoot and far too confident, tugs at your tunic. The floor's bubbling, smells like vinegar. You crouch, peer at the drain, and see the froth. A broken valve cap worn down by hot water in time. You fish a spare from your bag, twist it into place, and the bubbling ceases instantly. The girl claps, amazed. You fixed it. You nod, modest. It was leaking honesty. She wrinkles her brow. What does that mean? You just smile. Because no one should understand plumbing metaphors before they're 12. You leave her to her amusement, wondering if she'll grow up to be a water steward or a poet, or both. The water keeps moving. Back home, you light a single lamp and remove your boots. You record your final notes in the inspection ledger, one more day of tasks complete. Your hand aches from writing. Your sandals are dusted with lime. Your tunic smells faintly of pipe sealant and sheep fat. And yet you are content. Because tomorrow, thousands will wash, drink, soak, and flush without ever thinking of you. Or your notes. Or the valve you replaced behind the latrine. And that is, in its own way, victory. Final reflection. As you close the scroll, you think, what will future Rome remember? The aqueducts, yes, the names of emperors, the marble, the ruins. But perhaps, deep in some cracked wall or buried tank, a single lead pipe will remain still intact, still joined with resin and thread, still doing its job. And perhaps someone will wonder, who sealed it and why so carefully? And though your name may never be found, your work will answer. Because water remembers the hand that shaped its path. Story 22. Laundry in the wind. Clotheslines, gossip, and soapstone in a 17th century Andean town. The highland sun rises slowly in the Andes, not with a blaze but a yawn. First, a soft bloom of light over the thatched rooftops, then a breeze through eucalyptus branches, then the smell, warm earth, crushed herbs, and boiled soapstone. You are Maria Quisp, daughter of a textile dyer, mother of 4, and laundress to 3 households. You live in a small village nestled in the folds of colonial Peru, not far from a Franciscan mission, though far enough that you still hum Quechua songs while you work. Your hands are chapped, your fingers stained blue from indigo, and your eyes a little tired. Today is laundry day. But then again, so was yesterday. And so likely will be tomorrow. Before the washing, the hauling. The water must be fetched first. Always the water. You balance 2 clay jugs across a worn wooden yoke, the ends pressing into your shoulders as you descend the trail to the stream. It's cool here, shaded by stones and moss, and the sound of the current is both comforting and demanding. You squat, dip the jugs, and wait for them to fill slowly. Behind you, another woman appears, Aunt Rosa, not really your aunt but old enough to deserve the title. She settles beside you and sighs. The padre says the rain is late. You nod. The padre is always saying things. But it's true, the fields are dustier than usual, the garments dirtier, the river's song a little thinner. You shift the yoke and begin your walk back, heavy now with weight. Above, the clouds are cottony and indifferent. The washing circle. At the edge of the village is a shallow stone basin carved long ago, its edges worn smooth by generations of hands. Here you join the others. There is no formal meeting time, only a slow gathering of women with bundles, buckets, and stories. You greet them. Tomasa, who brings her baby strapped to her back. Isadora, always with onions in her apron for later. Little Nera, only 9, already scrubbing like a grown woman. Together, you begin the ritual. First, the rinsing, a cold, splashy affair. Then the soaping, with wedges of handmade lye soap and crushed soapstone, a gritty powder traded from a highland village 2 valleys over. It stings the cuts on your hands but smells of ash and flowers. Then the scrubbing, done against flat rocks, each woman finding her rhythm. It is not quiet work. There is a slapping, a splashing, coughing, laughing, gossip, so much gossip. You learn that Pedro's new wife washes shirts too white, suspiciously white. That the mule belonging to the merchant's son won't stop braying at night. That the friar dropped a basket of cassava in front of the bishop's cook and blushed like a boy. You nod, you chuckle. You say little. Your own secrets are folded in the fabric you carry. The garments themselves. Each item is familiar. A priest's cassock, stiff with ceremonial sweat. A child's tunic, stained with tamarillo. A woven blanket, fine but dusty. A pair of cotton trousers, patched 3 times at the knee. You know them like pages of a book. You wash the wealthy and the poor alike. You've learned that dirt clings to all classes, though some pretend it doesn't. You scrub in circles, fingers raw, back bent just so. And you think, if there is a way to know someone's soul, it may lie in how they dirty their clothes. Some stain with work, some with neglect, some with longing, but all are human, and all eventually require washing. The wind arrives. By midday, the wind has risen highland air, sweeping through the pass like a broom through a temple. The stones are warm now, the basin water warmer. The clothes are wrung by hand, twisted tight, flapped twice, and tossed onto lines strung between cedar posts, or laid flat on clean grass, anchored with pebbles. Each piece flutters like a prayer flag. Each item, a sentence in the long poem of your life. You sit back, rub your shoulders, and sip from a gourd of chicha morada, sweet and tart. And in the stillness of wet cotton and drying wool, you wonder how much of a village's memory is kept not in books, but in garments scrubbed, stretched, and left to dry in the wind. The clothes are drying slowly. The wind is steady but not strong, and the sun is careful, not hot. On a good day, you can dry 3 baskets before the shadows stretch. Today, you suspect you'll finish 2. You sit with your knees pulled up, elbows resting on them, and watch the lines. A row of white shirts, faded and mended. A heavy woolen cloak, once crimson, now rust. The bishop's underrobe, fine linen, stitched by cloistered hands in Lima. They sway gently, like dancers afraid of stepping too loudly. To the stranger's eye, it's just laundry. To you, it's a map of your village. A history of every back bent in harvest, every baby born in the night, every argument had in a kitchen while potatoes boiled in silence. Because no one leaves behind a diary, but everyone leaves behind a collar stained with garlic or tears. And you are the reader. The unspoken jobs. After the washing and before the folding, there is the quiet labor. You check each piece. Hold it to the light. Note the fraying seam on Doña Isabel's shawl, the tear in young Marco's sash, the stitch gone missing from the missionary's robe. You repair what you can, with thread if you have it, with scraps if you don't. You aren't paid for mending, but you do it. Because cleaning without care is only half a kindness. You tuck a message in a fold for one of the women you know well, a note tied in twine, reminding her of tomorrow's herb market. She'll find it when she shakes out her skirt. Not every message needs ink. The soapstone trade. Later in the afternoon, a trader from the next valley arrives on foot. His basket is heavy with soapstone powder, wrapped in small cloth packets. You trade him 2 woven cords, a bar of pine tar soap, 1 ripe cherimoya. He gives you 4 pouches, and a smile that looks like it's been rarely used. Rain next week, he says. You raise an eyebrow. He nods toward the clouds, the kind that crawls over the ridge like a tired uncle. You laugh once softly. Everyone's a poet in the Andes, especially those who carry powder and walk alone. He leaves as quietly as he came. Old stories, fresh shirts. The older women linger at the washing circle longer than needed. They scrub slower. They talk more. They retell stories you've heard since childhood. The girl who ran off with a wool dyer and returned 5 years later with a child and a llama. The soldier who hid gold in a bread oven and forgot where. The white chicken that walked through a sermon and laid an egg at the priest's feet. You know these stories. So do they. But telling them again beneath the wind, while shirts dry nearby. That's how a town keeps breathing. Like laundry airing itself out in pieces. A sky full of fabric. By late afternoon, the lines are full. The sky is a patchwork. The stripes, the solids, woven patterns. 1 child's smock with a small embroidered condor on the sleeve. You lift it gently. Hang it between 2 heavier garments so it won't be blown off. Someone will grow into it, or out of it, or pass it down. That's how clothes live here. Not worn and discarded, but used, reused, remembered. Every shirt has belonged to more than one person. Some even come back to you years later, smelling different, but still carrying the ghost of the first child who wore it. The quiet before folding. As the shadows stretch across the fields and the outlines of mountains grow sharper, the women begin to fold. No one rushes. You match sleeves, smooth collars, stack according to household, then age, then fabric. No one taught you this order. It's simply understood. Because laundry isn't just work. It's care performed quietly, without ceremony. Like all the most important things, you bundle your stack into a woven cloth and tie it tight. One bundle will go to the mayor's house, another to the priest, one to the sick woman with swollen ankles who paid you last month in a packet of dried mango. You won't charge her again. Not this time. And you wonder, when everything else fades, walls, stories, names, will there still be someone who remembers how to read a village by the weight of its wet sleeves? The light fades fast in the Andes. One moment the sky is golden and wide. The next, it is lavender, and then suddenly it is deep indigo, with only the faintest orange glow hiding behind the western peaks. You, Maria Quisp, walk slowly back toward the village, arms aching slightly under the weight of folded laundry bundles tied in twine and softened from the day's breeze. The stone path clicks gently beneath your sandals. Above, a condor circles. Below, the smoke from evening fires begins to curl from every rooftop, as if the town itself exhales at once. And in your arms, the fabric of other people's lives still warm from the sun. Deliveries without knocking. You never knock. Each household knows when to expect you at dusk, like always. You place the bundle on the low adobe shelf beside the door, wrapped with care. Some households leave a coin, some dried beans. One woman leaves you a little clay whistle shaped like a guinea pig. You smile at that one. Small thanks perhaps, but sincere and more precious than silver. You don't count your payments until after the children sleep. Because this isn't a business. It's a rhythm. Like rain in the dry season. Or music without strings. The shirt with no owner. In your last bundle, you find a single item that wasn't yours to begin with. A child's tunic, plain but well-stitched, small even by local standards. You frown, hold it up to the light. No initials sewn in. No patch to give it away. You glance toward the village square. Could be anyone's. Could be no one's. You fold it anyway. Place it beside your own children's clothing for safekeeping. Sometimes things come to you without explanation. And sometimes they do not wish to be returned. Evening beside the hearth. Home is one room, but large enough for comfort. The children are arguing over a walnut and a string. Your husband stirs a pot of thick stew, made with chuño, dried meat, and 2 small onions that cost more than he'll admit. You set the laundry basket down. Wash your hands. Rub them with fat to soothe the cracks. And sit. No one thanks you. They don't need to. They know. They smell it in the clean shirts, see it in the neat folds, feel it in the way their blankets warm faster now. That is enough. You are tired. Not exhausted, just full. As though the day has seeped into your bones like steam into a wool shawl. You stretch your back. And exhale. Dreams in cloth. At night, you sleep beneath blankets you once washed for someone else. They were gifted to you after a death, an old woman with no family, but beautiful taste in color. You still remember how the red dye ran the first time you rinsed it. Now it's brownish, but still warm, still hers, still yours. And you wonder, Do garments ever carry the breath of those who wore them first? Does a child's laughter remain stitched in a tunic? Does the heat of a long walk stay, woven into a man's cloak? And does the act of washing, folding, and wearing pass on something more than just thread? Final reflection. You dream that night of wind and white fabric, endless and swaying. In the dream, the lines stretch across the whole valley. Between houses, between lives, between this world and whatever lies after. And in that dream, you are not scrubbing or carrying. You are simply watching, as each piece of cloth tells its own story in silence. In flaps, in soft creases, in the way the sunlight touches them. And when you wake, the morning is still gray. Your arms still ache, the laundry still waits. But something else stirs quietly. And you rise because some histories are written not in stone, but in the soft fold of a sleeve turned inside out. Story 23. The Umbrellas of Edo, Rain, Paper, and Daily Life in 18th Century Japan. It's raining again in Edo. Not a storm, nothing dramatic. Just the long, steady kind of rain that softens rooftops, polishes wooden lanterns, and paints the streets with slick reflections of pale lanterns and gray skis. The shopkeepers shrug. The vendors tug their woven cloaks tighter. And you, Takahashi Rin, take a deep breath and step outside. A bundle of folded Wagasa traditional Japanese umbrellas balanced across your back like a pair of slender wings. The paper is oiled and stiff. The ribs are bamboo. And your job, as always, is to sell shelter from the sky. A good rain is good for business. You've worked for Mr. Kondo's umbrella shop since you were 13. Now, at 25, you're one of his most trusted assistants, an umbrella whisperer. He calls you when he's in a good mood. You know when it will rain without checking the sky. You know how much water the lacquered paper can hold before sagging. You know which customer wants something simple, and which one wants to be seen walking beneath a crimson canopy like a character from a No play. This morning, you've been assigned the North River route, where the streets are slick with mud, the tea houses thick with laughter, and the umbrellas, if you're lucky, sell fast. You adjust your pack, set your pace, and step into the wet, rhythmic world of Edo's side streets. Wagasa, a craft in motion. Each umbrella is handmade. You remember the process well. The ribs are carved from madake bamboo, split, steamed, and bent into fragile perfection. The canopy is made of washi paper, dyed and printed with soft florals or minimalist ink patterns. The whole thing is coated in perilla oil, which smells faintly nutty and keeps the rain out. They are not made to last forever. They are meant to age gracefully like ink on silk, or a favorite haiku scrawled in haste. Some last a season. Some survive 3. But all eventually bow to the rain. The streets speak in footsteps. The first sale of the day comes quickly. A merchant's wife high sandals, lacquered hair hesitates at a corner, shielded only by a cloth sleeve. You approach. Beau, forgive the intrusion. Would you like to see today's umbrellas, light, strong, and modest in price? She considers. Chooses a pale green design with lotus blossoms. Pays with 3 coins and no words. You bow again. Watch her vanish down the alley, a soft blur beneath the paper dome. You mark the sale in your tally book. 5 more sales, and Mr. Kondo will be pleased. 7, and he'll offer plum wine with lunch. You hope for 7. Rain, routine, and the sounds between. The sound of rain on paper umbrellas is its own kind of music. A soft ticking, a hush. Occasionally, a sharp plop when a drop hits just wrong and trickles down your back. The streets become quieter as the rain intensifies. Even the vendors grow softer in voice. You pause under the eaves of a wooden bridge. Eat a rice ball from your pocket. Watch a child float a leaf down the gutter, chasing it as it spins and weaves through puddles. He slips, laughs. His mother yells, but not too harshly. You smile. Nothing breaks a child's spirit like dry shoes. And you wonder, is that why umbrellas sell so well? Not just to keep people dry, but to protect something softer beneath it. Dignity, posture, peace. Returning light, returning thoughts. By late afternoon, the rain softens to mist. You've sold 5 umbrellas, 2 to travelers, 1 to a monk, 1 to a samurai's young attendant who asked too many questions, and 1 to a tailor who wanted something that won't blow inside out like my last one. Only 2 left in your bundle. You take your time walking back. The wood of the bridges smells like rain. The paper lanterns have begun to glow softly. You pass another vendor selling grilled fish cakes. The smell follows you, mingling with damp earth and old paper. You close your eyes. Let the breeze brush your cheek. And you wonder, what will be remembered, the umbrella itself, or the moment it protected someone from the world? The rain returns in the evening, as it often does in Edo. This time it's softer, a kind of whisper, the sort of rain that seems to rise from the stones rather than fall from the sky. You, Takahashi Rin, are back at Mr. Kondo's workshop, drying your sandals beside the brazier and counting the coins from today's route. 7 umbrellas sold. Mr. Kondo nods approvingly, though his eyes linger on the drizzle outside. Rain like this, he mutters, sipping barley tea, used to make poets famous. You smile. He said the same thing for years. But you also know that when he says poets, he's thinking about his late wife, who wrote haiku in the margins of his ledgers. Some of those umbrellas were once printed with her verses if you know where to look. The shop smells of oiled bamboo, burnt ash, and lacquer. It is, strangely, a very dry place for people who sell umbrellas. Where the umbrellas sleep. After counting and tea, you step into the back room, where unsold umbrellas rest in racks like sleeping birds. They are sorted by color, subtle on one side, bold on the other. Size, child's wagasa to ceremonial over canopies. Mood, your own, though no one else uses this system. You run a hand across the handles. Some have been waiting too long. Dust settles where no rain will fall. A few may never find buyers. Their patterns are too strange, their shapes a little off. Still, you don't discard them. Every umbrella has a chance to meet its sky. One day, the umbrella that wasn't for sale. In the far corner is an old red umbrella, the first you ever made, under Mr. Kondo's impatient guidance. The paper's cracked now. The ribs are warped. But it still opens with a soft pop. You keep it for yourself, though you almost never carry it. It's not practical anymore, but it reminds you of something. The way you shook during your first sale and the way the customer smiled and said, you held it like it mattered. That customer, an old man with a fishing pole, never returned. But the umbrella stayed. And that, you've learned, is the way things often go. People pass, the paper holds. For a while anyway. A man in need of shade. The next morning the rain is gone. The sky is glassy and still. And just as you're preparing to take a new bundle out into the quiet sunshine, a man arrives at the shop. He is tall, dressed plainly, and says very little except that he needs an umbrella, not for rain. For sun, he says, but not to keep cool. You look at Mr. Kondo, he shrugs. The man is silent a moment longer, then adds, I'm going to visit a grave. You nod. Say nothing else. You show him 5 umbrellas. He chooses one, white paper, unmarked, wide canopy. No patterns, no dye, almost plain to the point of invisibility. He pays in full. Leaves without another word. You watch him go. And wonder, What grief is quiet enough to ask for shade, but not color? Shadows and street corners. You head out once more. This time without a full bundle, just 3 umbrellas, and no real urgency. The rain has washed the streets clean. The canal reflects the rows of wooden houses with eerie precision. You pass. 2 children balancing on a rail. A fish seller arranging his catch with chopstick precision. An old woman washing shutters, singing under her breath. You pause beneath a pine tree to rest. And it strikes you. Even without rain, people carry umbrellas for shade, for modesty, for ceremony, sometimes even for something to hold when hands feel too empty. A parasol can be armor. A wagasa can be a memory. A paper dome above your head can feel like a shield against everything you don't say out loud. Return to the shop, slightly changed. By midday, you've sold 1 umbrella to a bride whose kimono was so bright it made the sun look shy. You return to the shop with 2 left. Mr. Kondo doesn't ask about the other sales. Instead, he points to the back wall, where a customer has left something behind a single sheet of rice paper, folded twice, tucked under a weight. It's a haiku, written in careful, slanted brushstrokes. You read it once, then again. It says, "Under silent wings." Rain becomes a private thought. Paper holds its breath. You look at Mr. Kondo. He shrugs. No name. But somehow, you think you know exactly who left it. And you wonder, do umbrellas hold memories, or do they simply protect them from being washed away? The next morning brings sunlight. Not the harsh kind, no sharp beams or cloudless heat, but the gentle kind that glows through paper windows and makes everything feel freshly painted. It's the sort of weather that makes you wonder if the rain ever happened at all. You, Takahashi Rin, stand at the front of the umbrella shop, the doors slid open wide, the smell of oiled bamboo lingering in the warm air. Today, you will not sell many umbrellas. But today is still part of the work. Because wagasa are not only for the wet, they are for weddings, for funerals, for poets, for modesty, for beauty. Sometimes even for nothing at all, carried only to feel elegant, to feel hidden, to feel held. And that is work too. Dusting what does sell. You begin with the shelves. Each umbrella is unfolded, inspected, dusted. You check for cracked ribs, loose cords, fading dye, forgotten messages. Yes, those happen too. 1 red parasol still holds the faint scent of plum blossoms. You close it slowly, as if trying not to disturb a memory. Another painted with koi fish has a tiny ink blot in the margin. Someone's poem long ago, now unreadable. You don't throw it away. Instead, you tie a small tag to its handle. Imperfection, 1 sen discount. Mr. Kondo smiles at that. Some people only buy what others don't want, he says. You nod, you understand. You are one of those people too. A wedding, a fold, a farewell. Around midday, you're asked to deliver an umbrella to a tea house in the East District. A wedding gift. The umbrella is pale ivory, printed with 2 cranes in flight, their wings nearly touching but never quite. You walk carefully with it wrapped in linen. The streets are lively now, children chasing crows, a merchant arguing about rice, the clatter of geta on the walkways. But as you near the tea house, you pause, because standing outside beneath the eaves is the man who bought the plain white umbrella 2 days ago. He holds it closed now. The sun is bright, but he does not open it. You bow politely. He bows back, says nothing, but you see it in his eyes. He's come from the grave. And the umbrella, even folded, has done its job. It gave him something to hold, to carry, to close when the visit was done. You pass him without words. Because some umbrellas are not for sale, even when paid for. Return and reflection. The delivery is made. The wedding umbrella is accepted with grace. The bride doesn't even look at it yet. She simply tucks it beside her, as though it were part of the future, not the present. On your way back, you stop by the river. The stones are warm. A heron watches you from the reeds. You open one of the remaining parasols just to hear the sound. That soft pop, like a question being asked politely. You hold it above you. The light filters through indigo dye, and you think. This is what a memory must feel like if it had a shape. Cool, woven, private, held just above the head, but never quite touching. Closing the shop, opening the sky. At sunset, the umbrellas are brought in. Mr. Kondo hums as he sweeps the front step. You stack the wagasa by size. Fold the returns. Wipe the counters. And before sliding the door shut, you take one last look at the sky. It's clear, but you leave a single umbrella outside the door open, resting lightly against the wall. It's an invitation, or maybe a promise, because the rain will come back. It always does. And when it does, someone will need shelter. Final reflection. Some crafts are loud hammers ringing on anvils, saws biting through timber. But not yours. Yours is quiet, folding and unfolding. Yours is patient, waiting for clouds. Yours is fragile, yet functional. And though no temple will be built for the makers of umbrellas, though no festival celebrates the sellers of dry shoulders and dignified walks, you know this. When the sky falls in drops, someone will always reach up hopping to meet it with paper, ribs, and string. And in that moment, your work becomes a roof. However briefly,